Hello, episode 34 of the Notcast, in which I, a middle-aged man with too much time on his hands, talks at a mobile phone about Star Wars. There are many other video YouTuber type things about this, but this is mine, and of all the YouTube series about anything ever, this is one. Today, talking about, on episode 34, Star Wars Revenge of the Jedi. Or as it's perhaps more popularly known, Return of the Jedi, the third Star Wars movie to be made, the sixth in the Skywalker saga, and probably the least favourite of the original trilogy people have. Now, first and foremost, I'm going to address a couple of things which are happening. It's 27th of December, almost the 27th of October there, and in lockdown, time has become somewhat elastic. Now, we're all time travellers, travelling through time 1 second per second forward into the future. By the time which it arrives, it's inevitably is the present, and if that isn't complicated enough, there's nothing going on. So we're in tier 4, only essential shops are open, and by only essential shops they mean food shops, chemist shops, and shops that like to think of themselves as essential but actually aren't. Now, in my opinion, record shops are essential shops, because music is a form of art. Art is necessary, and if we are not fighting for our survival and our justification through things like art and music and films, then why the hell are we bothering? Just to continue to stay alive? I don't know. Continued survival of the species without art or meaning is the type of thing that sharks do, and they just kind of endlessly replicate, with the only aim being to continue the bloodline. Now, if you want to continue the bloodline, Game of Thrones is there for you. Earth without art is as I've said previously. It's a bit blah, and if we don't have things like films and movies and books and music and dancing, then why are we even alive? Certainly, if you don't think that the arts and culture are worth sustaining, what have you been doing for the past 10 months? What have you been watching? What have you been listening to? What on earth are you doing? I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, here I am. Now, another thing that's different is it's daylight. Now, that's because we're in the Christmas holidays. Normally I do these at night, so it's normally a big light shining somewhere up there that you can't see, like a huge Death Star made out of light. Today is daylight, so we've actually got a huge ball of fire, 93 million miles, give or take a couple, that way, beaming into this room, and it will get darker throughout the course of the next 45 minutes. So by the end of this, I may possibly be sitting down like the Emperor, lit only by shadow, yes, and feel the hate run through your veins, etc, etc. I would have made a rubbish Emperor, of course. I'd have been like, guys, just hug it out, have a pizza, it's going to be fine. You're evil, I get it, both you guys are evil, stop it. But then, one of the things to be a prime time dictator is to have a huge ego. Is to have a desire to be listened to. Is to make bad jokes. Double oops. Actually, I'm talking about James Bond bad guys. I haven't got a white cat, so we're okay. Third thing I'll mention actually is around me. Now, I'm just a dude who's just putting random objects of pop trivia in front of you. Primarily to make the visuals look a little less dry and a little less dull, shiny. Really, the reason that I'm not into cutting footage from the Star Wars movies or anything like that is thanks to YouTube's copyright laws, which analyse 15 seconds of things into 5-second chunks, and if it identifies 5 consecutive seconds from certain pieces of intellectual property, it may ban or delete or warn you around that. And I don't really want any of this stuff to go off the internet. I probably will change my mind at some point around that, but I don't want to risk any of this by having a copyright strike placed against me by the big evil Google AI. And so therefore I'm going to talk about Return of the Jedi whilst putting books in front of you. Oops, I'm going to have to pause this. I've just knocked over a cuppa. Right, sorry about that. I knocked over the remnants of this cup into CDRs that are down there, just to prove keeping it real, unrehearsed. If it was a Hollywood movie, they'd probably take that section out, but it's not. And so there we have it. Hang on a moment, I'm going to reduce the risk that we have now, further spillages, by drinking out of this cup. I feel safer already. Right, so Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi was originally announced as Revenge of the Jedi on the very, very early promo poster, which I just showed you actually in the first trailer as well. So in the final and released version of the film, it was retitled to Return of the Jedi. So that's the first poster. I'd love to have a bigger version of that, but I don't have enough walls because I don't have a mansion. This obviously is the latter one, which most people know and love, and that was probably drawn by Drew Struzan, who is a fantastic artist who's responsible for a lot of the iconic 80s posters that you will have seen for films like The Goonies, Back to the Future, Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, all the Indiana Jones films, lots of other ones. It's a very unmistakable visual style. And Drew Struzan, by the way, is the inspiration for the lead character in the film of Stephen King's The Mist, and might very well be in the book as well. So there's a bit of a fan worship there from Frank Darabont, who directed The Mist. And The Mist, by the way, is one of the best horror movies of all time, with an ending that's so good that Stephen King said he wished he'd thought of it, which is pretty high praise considering how good Stephen King is. And Stephen King's book on writing is one of the best books about writing ever, and I strongly recommend it. But I'll talk about that inevitably when we get up to about episode 140, which, given the rate which I'm uploading these, may very possibly be next week. So Return of the Jedi is the final concluding film in the original George Lucas Skywalker saga, and it's a very good film. It's probably my least favourite of the original trilogy. It's also the one which I think has the first sign that perhaps George Lucas is recycling ideas. Now, if you remember from a previous episode, I showed you the graphic novel adaptation of the first draft of the Star Wars, which had scenes from all 6 of the George Lucas movies in them. But Return of the Jedi goes back to the well, and it goes back and repeats some ideas. Now, the definition of madness, according to the internet, is doing the same thing and expecting different results. If you're going to make another Death Star, don't be surprised if the Rebels blow it up, especially one that's unfinished. This apparently is twice the size, this Death Star, of the Death Star in the first Star Wars movie. But it has its own flaws and errors in it. So, I'm going to start off by comparing Star Wars to Return of the Jedi. Both start on Tatooine, both start with Luke. In the special edition of Star Wars, Jabba the Hutt appears. Jabba the Hutt's all over Return of the Jedi as well, at least up until a certain point. Then there's normally the classic bit where they get off Tatooine and they go somewhere else, and then the film kind of almost echoes a beat for beat repetition, actually, of huge chunks of Star Wars, because there's a battle in the Death Star, there's a lightsaber fight between 2 Jedi on the Death Star, one of them dies, the older one normally, all that type of stuff. So there's a lot of... Now, if you were whatever his name is, Rick somebody or other, and you go, it's so dense, it's like visual poetry, it rhymes and it repeats itself and all that type of stuff. Well, frankly, I don't really know whether it does or whether it doesn't. But what it does do is it starts to show that there's actually a lack of ideas around that. First and foremost, actually, although I've said first and foremost about 20 times, if you have a copy of Return of the Jedi and you want to know which one's the best version to watch, again, 2006 DVD release with the original theatrical release as a bonus disc on disc 2. George Lucas really screwed up the special edition for this, and I think actually now's the right time to go through it. So in the special edition of Star Wars Return of the Jedi, it's not very special. There are a multitude of changes that make the film actually far worse. There's an extra song on the soundtrack, which I think is called something like Jedi Rocks or something equally awful. There's a new CGI band leader. Max Rebo is sidelined. The Sarlacc has a gigantic beak, Why? It's a creature that lives in a hole in the desert. It doesn't need a beak. It's just a gaping maw. By turning it into a beak, you end up turning it into a Muppet. There's also a number of other changes through the film, but perhaps the most egregious of them is the ending montage, where in the standard DVD Blu-ray editions, not the 2006 version, the song it changed. Yub Nub, I call it, although obviously it's not actually called Yub Nub. The song is changed into a far blander piece of work that doesn't feature the Ewoks singing. And by the way, if you want to translate the lyrics to Yub Nub, they are considerably more, I think, celebratory than the lyrics that we've got, because there are no lyrics on the celebration at the end of the special edition. It's a very bland flute piece. You don't even get the shot of the Ewoks playing Stormtrooper helmets in tune, and quite how they've tuned those Stormtrooper helmets to be like a pair of steel drums which have different on, I don't know, but on the original 1983 movie, obviously the Ewoks celebration and then playing it is part of the soundtrack, it's part of the song, it's a texture, whereas on the 1997 special editions it's just a random shot of Ewoks playing drums on Stormtroopers' heads. It loses the charm. And of course the celebrations also have two terrible additions, in so much as firstly Jar Jar Binks and Coruscant are seen, and you can hear Jar Jar Binks shouting "We are free," or at least I think you can. And Hayden Christensen, the actor who played Anakin in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, turns up and replaces Sebastian Shaw. And Sebastian Shaw played the old version of Anakin Skywalker, the man underneath the mask, on the original unaltered theatrical release. The 2006 theatrical release DVD is really the only version of Return of the Jedi worth watching. The special editions from 1997 and onwards are made nearly unwatchable by the absolute goddamn garbage that's in those extra scenes where Lucas thought he was making it better. Sometimes you just need to walk away from something and go, that film was a fair and accurate representation of who I was at the time and what I believed, and bloody stick with it. There is no world in which Jedi Rocks is a good song and which taking out the Ewok drummers is a good move. Absolutely no version of reality is that improved, apart from possibly the one that lives at Skywalker Ranch. So, what should we say? The new song is awful. The ending credit song is awful in the special edition. Don't watch it. It sounds like I'm kicking Return of the Jedi, but I'm not. It's a really good film. It's lots and lots of fun, but it doesn't know what it wants to be. And it repeats a lot of story beats from previous movies. In the first part of the movie is rescuing Han Solo from Jabba and his palace, but once they've rescued Han Solo doesn't really do very much. Now, the original version of Return of the Jedi saw that Han Solo was going to die in the assault on Endor, but he didn't. And also, when he said in the hangar bay, he said to Lando that I have a feeling that I'm never going to see the ship again. Originally, the Millennium Falcon was meant to bite it at the end, and when the Millennium Falcon was trying to outrace an explosion, was that it wouldn't make it and it would be consumed. In the end, it just knocked the top of the radar dish off. But they didn't know what to do with Han Solo after he gets rescued. They've spent the first third of the movie rescuing Han Solo, and then the rest of the movie, Han Solo kind of hangs around and goes, "Guys, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to be part of a battle on Endor, but that's about it, guys. I don't really know what else you want me to do." And he doesn't really do anything else about that. I'm going to switch the light off, because I've switched the light on. There. That should be a bit better. Colour should be a bit more dramatic as well. So Return of the Jedi is not, my favourite of the original Star Wars movies. There's a number of things about it that I love, and a number of things about it that I don't. And so, for example, one of the things that I don't love about it are these dudes, Ewoks. They're not called Ewoks in the film. You never know what they're called in the film. The only way that you found out that Ewoks were called Ewoks was because they were named on toys, and possibly in a novelisation, which is by, I think, let me just check, James Caan. There's the novelisation. Actually, let's check and see if they're called Ewoks. I'm not really sure. I can't see. Yep, they're called Ewoks in the novelisation. On Endor, the Battle of the Bunker continued. Stormtroopers kept irradiating Ewoks with sophisticated weaponry, while the fuzzy little warriors bashed away at the Imperial troops with clubs, tumbled walkers out with log piles and vine tripwires, lassoed speeder bikes with vine ropes, and net traps. So Ewoks were originally meant to be Wookiees, and they were meant to be the standard height. And it was, I think, as I understand it, some kind of version of an analogy between the Vietnam War and recast in space. So one thing I haven't mentioned previously, and by the way, this is one of the original designs here for Ewoks. Not very short, aren't they? Not very tall for a Wookiee, are you? But one of the original kind of ideas when George Lucas was in the same film school as, I think, Francis Ford Coppola and John Milius and Steven Spielberg, was that he was thinking about adapting Hearts of Darkness, and in many ways Star Wars is actually his adaptation of Hearts of Darkness set in the science fiction world. It's about a quest to go and find the head source of all evil and try and understand what's going on with him. So in Apocalypse Now, when they're heading up the river and all the journeys that they have towards getting towards Willard's and Kurtz's compound, those are the same journeys. It's just a different thing. Instead of going up the river and going in Da Nang or wherever else it is, it's Tatooine, it's Dantooine, it's Yavin, it's all that stuff. And so the Vietnam War element was kept over and installed into Return of the Jedi. Now, the idea that we had actually around the stormtroopers in this Battle of Endor, in my opinion, is that the Battle of Endor is actually a battle between people that care and people that don't care. And the Ewoks really care about this because an invading force has come in and taken over their home. Whereas for the Stormtroopers, it's just a job. And if I can quote the great Bison from, I think, Street Fighter the movie, played by, no, not Street Fighter, I think it was Mortal Kombat, played by Raul Julia, which is: the day that I came to your village was the worst day of your life, but for me it was a Tuesday. For Stormtroopers, this is just a Tuesday. It's a bad day at work. They're not fighting for the survival of their home. They're not fighting to get rid of the invaders that have taken over their house. It's just, now I have to go and battle these little furry dudes. And obviously the little furry dudes have a completely different way of thinking about warfare than the stormtroopers. So the stormtroopers are almost hobbled by their technology. They've got land speeders, they've got laser guns, they've got weird helmets where you can't see anything out of them. I don't know who looked at a stormtrooper's helmet and went, that's a good design for battle, because you can only really see out these tiny little pinpricks, you haven't got the full spectrum of vision that you've got around there. They're poorly designed helmets, and that's possibly one of the reasons why the Empire fell, is because stormtroopers can't see shit out of those helmets. And Ewoks also, they're about this tall. If you're a stormtrooper, you're looking up here, you can't see an Ewok because he's too bloody small. Your range of vision is tiny. So frankly, the Empire had it coming, and they should have chosen a different planet, really, as opposed to one that's populated by ferocious little teddy bears. Now, there's a number of other things around that. Is that there's almost too many creatures in Return of the Jedi, especially in Jabba's palace. Now, when Jabba's palace, and I'm going to call it that, is a repetition of the bar scene from Star Wars, is that you've got lots of guys in outfits standing around looking weird and alien, only for the sole purpose of looking weird and alien. Now, one thing I have noticed is all these alien species, almost all of the Empire, are humans. You don't see, a robot or an Ewok or any of the other species from alien planets working for the Imperials. It's always humans, apart from General Thrawn, who's Expanded Universe, who comes in 1991. But you never ever see in the original movies an alien as one of the bad guys. At least I don't think you do. You just genuinely don't know. Is it all humans? Is the easiest way to tell that somebody's a member of the Empire is the fact that they're human, and they've probably been promoted far beyond their competence because they were standing next to the guy that screwed up when Darth Vader found out. Not quite sure. Obviously, if I was a comedian, I would have worked on that particular riff, I think, in far more detail. And I've got to think, actually, about whether I want to talk about the Death Star and contracts, because there's a whole element around Death Star and contracts, which I think I might talk about in another episode rather than get distracted onto this one. one of the other things actually about the Return of the Jedi is that it has my favourite Star Wars character. Now, I'm not sure any of you particularly care who my favourite Star Wars character is, but I'm going to tell you who it is now. This guy here is my favourite Star Wars character, and he's not named in the movie, but there he is, ladies and jelly spoons, Max Rebo. Max Rebo is the keyboardist in Jabba the Hutt's palace, and as the band, and as payment for working at Jabba the Hutt's palace, Max Rebo agreed to free food forever, and somehow the rest of his band are now trapped in Jabba the Hutt's palace, being fed by Jabba the Hutt, but they have to play the same songs endlessly over and over again for Jabba the Hutt, who, as I understand it, is a terrible boss, because if the translator tells him something he doesn't like, he gets the translator vaporised or liquidated when it said something that displeased him. So there you go. Don't work for Jabba and don't be a member of his house band. The pay is awful, the conditions are terrible, and surely you must have learnt that from watching how the Imperials have their HR system. And by the way, Darth Vader, HR would like to talk to you about how you promote your employees. We don't think you're going through an adequate interview process. So moving on from that, I think what I will say is there's a couple of other things around Return of the Jedi that are technically absolutely staggering. Now I'm going to show you a screen grab, because it's probably okay under the Google's laws, of what is the most complicated physical effects shot that I think has ever been shot, which is this one here. Now, according to what I heard, this shot has 159 separate elements in it, which means there are 159 separate models in there. Now, Return of the Jedi was probably the glory days of physical modelling, of making spaceships. So I went to see the Star Wars exhibition in 2007 at Westminster, and they showed you the filming models that they had for the Star Destroyers, the filming models that they had for the actual screen set shown Millennium Falcon. They also showed it at 2017's Identities at the O2 Arena. And standing there and looking at the models and going, that's the Millennium Falcon that I've seen on the screen. That's the Star Destroyers, the medical frigates, the X-wings. That's the actual stuff that they had. That's mind blowing to see that and to go, that's something that I saw. All that remains of Jabba, by the way, are his eyes, because the rest of Jabba was made out of foam, and foam deteriorates and rots over time. So the only thing that remains of the Jabba costume is his eyes. Everything else has disappeared. Another thing, actually, which you'll find pretty interesting, is that the sizes that they used for the models were dictated by the sizes of the action figures and retail toys. So for Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back, they were often populating scenes in the background with store-bought TIE Fighter toys, especially on Return of the Jedi, and so it was really interesting to see that basically the toys that you had when you were a kid, if you were a kid who had those toys, those are the same model, the exact same models of the same production line. It might have come out of the production line half an hour earlier as the ones which were actually being used by Lucasfilm on screen. But this effect shop with 159 models in also has one of the most famous goofs, which I'll quickly show to you here. I'd like to thank somebody on the internet for pointing that out, is that you actually have two Ghost TIE fighters that appear to fly through the Millennium Falcon. Now, if you watch it carefully enough, you can see that happening, but not on the special editions, because they have, sadly, been deleted from the special editions of the movies, and this is why you should stick with the original theatrical cuts, folks, because not only are they better, you have more chance of watching it at home and going, oh my god, I didn't notice that those two TIE fighters could fly through the Millennium Falcon. Now, story wise, I think Return of the Jedi is quite a satisfying film. I mean, that three-way climax that you've got at the end of the film, where you've got the battle on Endor, you've got the battle in space, you've got the battle in the throne room, all happening and connected at the same time. It's a masterpiece of film editing, really, really influential as well in doing a kind of like a triple-hander. So you watch something like Inception, which has multiple battles happening at the same time on different planes of reality. Not difficult to follow, by the way, unless you're dense, but not difficult to follow at all. All you've got to do is to remember where each one of those scenes picked up. And you've got the same kind of three-way battle in Phantom Menace again, which is at the start, or more correctly at the end of the film, where you've got the battle outside Naboo. You've got the battle on Naboo with the Queen trying to get into the throne room, and you've got the battle between the two Jedi and the evil Darth Maul, and you can tell he's evil because he's called Darth and he's got horns on his head. But it's a fantastic piece of movie editing that I strongly recommend. So what else am I going to talk about? Well, not a huge amount. There's a lot of spin-off stuff that went alongside with Return of the Jedi, and I've got more Return of the Jedi spin-off stuff than I have for anything else because I was older and I had more pocket money. So we had obviously the obligatory novelisation by James Caan, which is 8 pages of fabulous colour as opposed to 8 pages of mediocre colour. And this is the UK edition because colour is spelled correctly, by the way. This would have cost £1.75, and I'm not quite sure where I got this copy. This might be the copy I had when I was 10 years old. There also was a number of other publications, as I've kind of mentioned. Here's the Return of the Jedi pop-up book. Oh, look, it's a pop-up Imperial shuttle. It's pop-up Jabba's palace. Let's see what happens here. You lift this up, and this comes up. Oh, look, it's a Jabba. Ho, 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 ho. Wait, I know that laugh. And obviously you've got Luke here. Oh, I'm Luke. I'm still Luke, but I'm falling in a hole. Obviously reminds me very much of the Team America movie. Closer, please, Hans Bricks, as I believe it goes. It's Jabba's sail barge. If you want to see some interesting things, do Google Blue Harvest for some shot photos of the scenes shot in the desert, because they were shot in publicly accessible places. I remember showing you this one before as well. I don't even know why I'm showing you that. Anyway, that was exciting. There's also 2 annuals for Return of the Jedi. This one is the aforementioned adaptation of the movie in graphic novel stroke comic book form, published by Grand Dreams. And again, this one was a Christmas present because someone's taken the price tag off. So there you have it. This, by the way, is the Return of the Jedi annual from 1984. This is not my copy, although I own it now. This is Peter Dennis Murphy's from 1984 for Christmas, from Kim and Danny, aged 12. Thanks, Kim and Danny, aged 12. Peter Murphy's copy is now safely in my possession, and this is when they were taking episodes from it's Peter's book. I should get off it. I better put that down right now. Sorry, Peter. Get off. Not one of the finest Prince songs. Here's also The Art of Return of the Jedi. Now this one really pleased me. It's £3.49. I bought this from Canterbury, Oxfam, around about 10 years ago. And I picked up the other Art of Star Wars and Art of Return of the Jedi books around about the same time. Now, the soundtrack was issued in a multitude of formats. As previously mentioned, it was only released as a single LP in 1983, so you could only get 46 minutes of the music from Return of the Jedi when Return of the Jedi was issued. The soundtrack album here was a gatefold. This is a repressing on gold vinyl from around about 2014 or thereabouts. I had this LP as a child. I traded it in so I could buy Iron Maiden and Pet Shop Boys records when I was about 15. But I very distinctly remember sitting and listening to the LP version of this and wondering where all the music had gone. By the way, and I've probably mentioned this before, the music recordings that are on these albums, and also the Empire Strikes Back and Star Wars one, are often re-recorded and rearranged, so they're not the versions that you hear on the soundtracks. They're the versions that were recorded and prepared for home release, because it's a different listening experience listening to it at home than it is listening to it in the cinema, with considerably less explosions unless you're very unlucky. And in 1997, the Return of the Jedi soundtrack was issued as a 2 CD version, which featured a number of expanded versions. That was effectively the first time that the full soundtrack for the film was released, alongside what it calls some alternate takes and source music. So it had, for example, Ewok Feast and Part of the Tribe, and the archival bonus track, The Forest Battle Concert Suite, which was a considerably different arrangement of The Forest Battle. Do you know, I can't recall whether this version has got the Yub Nub on it or not. Certainly on the soundtrack of LP, Yub Nub is called Ewok Celebration, but if I say Yub Nub, everybody knows what Yub Nub is. This is the last of the soundtrack things which I think I'll mention. It is a 4-CD 1993 Lucasfilm box set of the Star Wars trilogy. At the time this came out, this was the big enchilada, the mutts nuts, the real thing. It was, you know, the fantastic box set that featured at last all the Star Wars trilogy music, but it was really expensive. I think it was about 40, 45, 50 pounds when it came out. I bought this copy in December 2000, 20 long years ago, from HMV on Oxford Street. It cost me £10 and it was £10 well spent. And what you'll see, yep, 1993 Lucasfilm, and what you'll see is, you know, this had the barcode taken out and replaced with a £10 price sticker by HMV staff, which I've managed to get off. But let's have a look in here. Now, this was in the days when HMV Sales weren't organised centrally, so a store would look at its stock that it hadn't sold for ages, and it would go, well, what haven't I sold, and you know, what price am I going to put it on? And so they looked at this, which had probably been sat on the shelf for 7 or 8 years at about £50, and went, fuck it, we'll call it a tenner. And they sold it pretty much the day, because I you know, on Boxing Day, I was not in a relationship at that time, and anybody that I wanted to be around was not in London, because I'd only moved to London on the 5th of December, so I'd only been living in London for 3 weeks at the time that I bought this. I was living in a one-bedroom studio flat for £476 a week, walking distance from Victoria Station. And I was building my social life, I was building my friendships, I was building my relationships. So to me, to walk up to Oxford Street to go to the, you know, to see the Star Wars, or more correctly, to see the HMV sale, you know, that was a no-brainer. I wasn't going to be doing anything else apart from possibly watching James Bond films on VHS or DVD, because one of the first things I did when I moved down to London was I bought a DVD player, and I bought, I think, 5 DVDs to start off with. I bought The Thing, I bought Mystery Men. I think I didn't buy any Star Wars or Indiana Jones, but I bought some other things. You know, I've still got the copies of The Thing and the Mystery Men, by the way. But HMV were doing their sales where they were actually on a store-by-store basis. So if you went to different stores of HMV, you would get different things, different bits of random not moving stock that was heavily reduced. So the Star Wars trilogy soundtrack box set was £10, and I was really pleased with that. So there's lots of previously unreleased music on here. Same thing with The Empire Strikes Back, which is expanded through to 19 tracks. The Return of the Jedi was extended out to something like 19 songs as opposed to 12, and had 5, 6, 7, 8 previously unheard songs on there and 8 cues, and then there was an extra disc of extra material which ran from all through the various versions of the film. And then there was obviously a booklet that went in it on 4 CDs. This one's deleted now, probably difficult or easy, depending on your point of view to get. I did look it up on Discogs a while ago. CDs all had a nice picture from the concept art on, and so on and so forth. Love that graphic, by the way. I've got a t-shirt with that graphic on. I haven't worn it yet. Well, as always, all the t-shirts that I wear are chosen for thematic accuracy to the original subject that we're talking about. So I've gone for a 2008 long sleeve t-shirt by Next, and which again was licensed by Lucasfilm. And I remember, the reason I remember 2008 is because I was really happy about it when I bought it, and I wore it the first time that I went to Paris, which was in 2009. Anyway, that's the Star Wars trilogy soundtrack. So that's been me talking about Return of the Jedi for about 35 minutes. Next is probably me talking about U2's Rattle and Hum, actually, maybe with slightly less dramatic lighting. And then also probably after that I've got a couple of other things which I'm thinking about, one of which is about ranking the Pet Shop Boys albums, one of which is talking through the Depeche Mode discography with an episode or so per album, and obviously I've got to pick up and continue the U2 ones that I'm talking about. If you found that the bit where I digress and I start talking about when I moved down to London in the year 2000 is of interest to you, I'm quite happy to talk about, you know, parts of my personal history and my life. Obviously, they are going to be written through the prism, like all history is. The history is written by the victors, so you'll get my perspective. You won't get the perspective of other people that were in the room at the time. But that is the nature of the beast. Now, it's 27th of December. It's Sunday. It's probably around about 3:45, which means the sun's going to go down pretty soon. I'm going to wrap up at this point. I'm going to do something that makes me feel a heck of a lot safer by finishing this drink for music. Isn't that exciting, watching me drink from a mug? Maybe not. I will catch up with you on another episode. The next one is almost definitely going to be me talking about YouTube's Rattle and Hum. So as per normal, if I'm wrong, don't forget to tell me in a harsh manner, because that's how the internet works. Do put questions, comments, or anything like that if you want to underneath the bottom, and don't forget to be excellent to each other, although that is obviously a slightly different franchise which I'm quoting there, but there you go. So Yub Nub, and see you all soon. Okay, bye.